Hello.
We are Project Communication, and we are Perfectly Imperfect. I'm Linda.
I'm Sherry behind the camera.
And I'm Mary.
And today we have a very special guest, Maureen Leahy. Now, I know that Maureen has a resume that is long as your arm. And so I'm going to break it down a little bit. Let me see. The highlights of her career is nursing, leadership, and teaching roles in more than 5 hospitals and hospice centers. Her latest was serving at the Sharon Richardson Center for 5 years as the chief clinical officer and has recently retired. Woo! She has 2 grown sons and a beautiful daughter that resides in a heavenly home. She has lost the love of her life, a daughter, and a mother, and she has defeated the odds of breast cancer. So in this time together, we will hear and feel the depth of Maureen's deep, abiding love for people, her deep, abiding love for life. And a phrase I have always heard so often is, I don't care what you know, I need to know how you care.
Love that.
And so while I'm impressed with your education, and I really am, I'm deeply moved by her integrity, her story, and her love.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you. So nice to be here with you. Thank you.
And we met as we were getting our nails done.
Which is so funny and so great.
It was so funny.
It was kismet.
It was. It was.
Yeah.
And as I'm looking at her, as she's sitting over there, and she starts talking to me, and I'm thinking, oh my God. She comes from that really higher realm of living than I do.
No.
Because she carries herself with such grace. Okay, so during our discussion the other day and in the last few months, I felt your passion. I heard your extensive knowledge and the deep, heartfelt wisdom that you have gained. What drew you to this vocation?
Oh, I could tell you that I feel like my avocation is my vocation, and I'm one of the lucky ones, that I don't think nurses ever really retire, truly. So I was in nursing school, wanting to be there since I was a little girl, never really wanted to do anything else. Found myself at a Catholic college in upstate New York, Niagara University, and where I met my husband, and I thought that I wanted to be a teacher. I'd come from a family of teachers, started in cardiac care, but found myself on a mixed unit as a graduate nurse after I graduated from college, Ingham County Medical Center in Lansing, where my husband was in law school at the time. And I worked the evening shift as a graduate nurse, totally green, and swore I never would do anything with cancer or anything like that. But it was a mixed unit of cardiac rehab and oncology, and I found myself just drawn to those patients and families. So it was cancer care for a little while, and then it became hospice work for really the most of my almost 50-year career in nursing. It's been hospice and palliative care and end-of-life care. My father died when he was 57 of squamous cell lung cancer, and I'd been a young nurse, maybe 6 years at the time, and I watched him suffer through that diagnosis and treatment. And I was maybe 6 years in nursing at the time, and I didn't know it then, but my life was being shaped in such a way that I would learn what kind of nurse I didn't want to be, and really sort of try to figure out what kind of nurse I did want to be and should be. And I think that my career and the footprints that I've taken have been in the footprints of people that have gone before me that I have admired and loved, in both in nursing and in leadership. So that experience with my dad, as painful as it was, I knew that it shaped my life in such a way that I would end up sitting here with you. today.
and we are so honored to have you here. So, can you share with us the history of hospice and where it originated?
Yeah, so hospice is it's a gorgeous model of healthcare, and I think one that is very misunderstood, and I think it has so many scary attachments to it that people don't really know what a glorious thing it is. I feel like it's the best kept secret in the world. It started in this country in the early 70s. In 1974, a woman named Florence Wald, who was the dean of the College of Nursing at Yale, went to London, where she met Dame Cicely Saunders, who founded the modern hospice movement in London. Cicely Saunders was a nurse that hurt her back in the war, trained as a social worker, and then went to medical school at the ripe old age of 35 with the intention of doing something about pain. So Florence goes to London to figure out what the heck is going on in this world of end-of-life care. We have come to call it hospice care. She brought it back to the United States in the early 70s and founded the North American model of hospice care, which was a home care model. Hospice comes from the word hospitality, and it means to be both a host and a guest. It means that we are served as we serve others. And the model, I think, was partly grew from a desire to do something about pain, something about human suffering, improve communication between patients and families and their carers, and I think bring together a multidisciplined effort to take care of people. People are more important than just their physical. We're fully social and functional and intellectual and spiritual, and I think to dismiss any of those dimensions of what makes us human is to shortchange people. And so that model has really grown over the years. If you think about the early 80s in this country, it was fraught with a lot of social change. It also brought us the AIDS epidemic. And those of us in hospice work really recognize that caregiving model of those very brave patients dying with AIDS and their caregivers showed us a lot of empathy, of compassion, of how to do it well and how to do it right. And so the early 80s really shaped the models of hospice that we see today. It's changing for sure because Medicare is stepping away from reimbursing hospices. And so while I'm happy to be retired and out of the operations part of things because it scares me what the future will hold, I also have great hope for the future because I know there are so many incredible professionals, physicians and nurses that are doing the hard work of hospice and end-of-life care.
When we were talking the other day, you mentioned the germ theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where it originated from.
Yeah.
And how it changed the trajectory of the family interaction, dying in the home, and the development of hospice. So can you kind of share with us that germ theory?
So I love that because, I tell the story. I learned it from a medical anthropologist at the University of Vermont, and she was just talking just lightly about things, and I was so enthralled with what she was saying. 100 years ago, we lived on a farm, and we ate the pig, and we ate the cow, and the children grew up in a home that the baby was born in the master bedroom, and the grandfather died in the master bedroom, and we had the wake in the parlor. That was true in the ebb and flow of the family life. We grew up with this thing called dying, and it was part of our understanding of that life cycle, right? So then we got the germ theory, and Louis Pasteur and Florence Nightingale identified it. She was a nurse. Yes. Identified it first: clean air, clean hands, clean water. there must be something to that. And so bacteria was discovered, antibiotics were discovered. And so Granddad, who was 104 years old, who was up in his bedroom, dying, stopping eating, stopping drinking, loving the company of his family, dying well with dignity and love and care and support in his own bed with his own pillow. He couldn't die at home anymore. We had to build these places called hospitals. And so Granddad, because he had to get antibiotics, because he had an infection. And so we sent him to the hospital. And he died in the hospital, because that's what 104-year-olds do often. And rather than send him back home to have the wake in the parlor, we had to build funeral parlors. And so we sent Granddad to the funeral parlor, and we began to call the place in our home that had been the parlor, we started to call it the living room. And so we lived in our homes. We didn't die in our homes. And so children, sociologically, it changed kind of the way we view death and the fear sometimes that we have of it. And so I think that going back to birthing a baby in the home is the same thing as birthing a person to death in the home. It doesn't have to be medicalized. It shouldn't be medicalized. And yet most people die tethered to a ventilator in the ICU on a, with their family in the waiting room, And so all of those things we know about dying well and those developmental tasks that we need to do as we die, getting ready, saying I love you, saying goodbye, saying I forgive you, saying please forgive me, saying thank you. We don't do that if we've got a pipe stuck down our throat and we're just waiting to die. So the work of dying is important, and I think the developmental tasks of dying is important as well. Just like a baby that developmentally sits and stands and creeps and crawls and walks. Maybe not in that order, but so we die developmentally. We know that to die well, you should have an opportunity to ask forgiveness, or to say I forgive you, or to say thank you to the people that we love, to say goodbye, to really
say goodbye. And you can't do that when you got the mask on your face and the tube down your throat and yeah.
But we're no better at it, really. We're not any better, really, at it. I think there are pockets of people that are trying very hard. There are certainly champions in our field of hospice and palliative medicine that are doing the hard work of this. And really, if you ask me what the superpower of the palliative care team was, I would tell you that it's communication, which is what we're doing here. We have to learn how to communicate what we hope for, what's important to us. And we can't do that in the middle of a crisis, because a crisis is fraught with emotion. And we know that we can't make good decisions when we're emoting, because it hijacks our cognition, right? When you're emoting, your amygdala lights up and you can't receive information. It's physiologically not possible for your brain to receive information. And so there's really no understanding when you're angry or worried or frightened, So I think we have to teach our clinicians to learn how to tend to emotion before we move those important communications forward.
Okay, Mary, I know you have a question.
I've got a couple questions here. When you were working, you taught doctors and nurses on ways to listen to the patient and to their families. There's an acronym NURSE, N-U-R-S-E. Would you please explain that?
There is. Cicely Saunders said, listen to your patients. They'll tell you. They'll tell you who they are. They'll tell you what they need, and they'll tell you what they can achieve. Listen. The same letters that spell the word listen are the same letters that spell the word silent.
Oh, wow.
And so we can't listen if we're talking in our head or talking out loud. So the Vital Talk people, there's a wonderful project called Vital Talk. Tony Beck and Bob Arnold wrote a wonderful book about communication, and they started a work called Vital Talk. It has morphed into Jerry Talk, Onco Talk, Vital Talk, and where we teach clinicians how to use the skills of communication. We know that we can teach them. sometimes you think, oh, I couldn't possibly teach that person how to communicate well because they have no emotional intelligence, or they're they're left brain and they're a researcher and they don't do that well. But we know that we can teach it. One of the skills that we teach are nurse statements. N stands for you name the emotion. U is you give an understanding statement. R is respect. S is support, and E is explore. So Mary, I would sit with you and I would say, you seem angry. I can't imagine how hard this has been for you. I want you to know how much I admire how strongly you're advocating for your mother. My team and I are going to be here to help you through this. Tell me more about what's making you angry. And in those NURSE statements, I named the emotion, I gave an understanding statement, I gave a respect statement, I gave a support statement, and I gave an explore statement. In those 5 things, I could align myself with this person who was really angry. Typically, you would say to me, I'm not angry, I'm frustrated, and then I would do them again. I would repeat that same system of understanding to align myself with the emotion that you're feeling. Typically, people then begin to cry, and then they often say, I'm just really frightened, or I'm just really lonely. I just don't know what to do next. And so we use nurse statements as a skill that we teach, and we use silence. I was saying to Linda, we're cognitive ATM machines, right? We just want to fill the silence with words and facts, and let me tell you about your disease and your treatment. But usually that's not what people want to hear. They usually want to listen in the silence. I had a patient that he was dying at the hospice, and he was young. He had testicular cancer. And I walked really early into the hospice house, and he was sitting on his bed, and I quietly sat down next to him, and we held hands, and I said, why are you crying? And he said, Maureen, I'm just wondering what it's like to be dead. Now, me, who usually has a ton of words, I had just really learned about holding hands, and about, you hold someone's hand, you slip your hand under theirs. She might not want to hold my hand. And so if I put my hand under hers, it gives her a chance to take her hand away if she doesn't want me to hold it. Because that's power. Most people do this, right? And then you've got to hold my hand.
No choice.
Right? And so you slip your hand under
death grip.
Right?
Here.
So that's what I did with him. And he kept his hand there. And I said, I don't know what it's like to be dead. And we quietly, now I wanted to say a million things, but I just was muted. And we quietly in the dark at 6 a.m. wondered together what it was like to be dead. I started to cry. He stopped crying. We both started crying. I stopped crying. He started crying. I started crying. We both stopped crying. And when it was over, he looked at me and he said, thank you. And I didn't say a word, Wow. And so I think what I learned in that was that I have much more to say in my silence, and much more to say in my presence, and that humanity or that compassion that I think is so missing in the world.
Yes.
I learned a lot that day, and I don't remember much these days, but I remember that like it happened yesterday. So many important lessons. We have much less to help when we say things as opposed to do things.
When you say something, that blocks every other possibility out.
Very true. It's very true, because it's I think sometimes it becomes an agenda, right? Or it becomes your interpretation of what that person is going through. And I also think that experience out of that wellspring of hard things comes an understanding and an ability to empathize, right? Lynn and I were talking about empathy, that in order to walk in somebody's shoes, you've got to be willing to take your own off. And taking your own shoes off is scary. I don't want to have breast cancer. I don't want to have a lover die. I don't want to have a child die. I don't want to have a father die, or a mother, or a niece. I don't want to go through a hard divorce. But when you do those things, you it's not that you become an expert in it, but you have your empathy grows for that deeper understanding. And I think it generates a little bit of credibility when you can speak to someone. When I speak to mothers that have lost children today, I speak from a place of pain and understanding of all the would-haves and should-haves and if only I had kinds of things that I know mothers feel. So I do think that it's important that we speak from a place of integrity, but also a place of deep understanding.
I find it interesting that you brought up mothers losing children. Mary has lost several babies.
Yes, I have.
And the doctors were less than...
One in particular
Yeah.
was less than compassionate. He was not a listener.
Yeah.
I'm
Definitely.
sorry.
Thank you. I have more questions for you. And a lot of people have heard, and they refer to the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has made actually famous.
She did.
Would you walk us through
Sure.
those stages?
So Kubler-Ross was a Swiss psychologist. Say that 3 times fast.
No kidding.
She was extraordinary in so many ways. A little bit kooky at the end of her life, but extraordinary woman. She published on Death and Dying in 1969. Think of the world in the late 60s, early 70s, right? We talked about hospice not really coming to this country until 1974. So it was around that same late 60s, early 70s that there was a fervor for this work. She came to the United States really after publishing that book in 1969 and went to a hospital in the States, and she said, "Where are the dying patients?" And the doctors and nurses said, "No one's dying in this hospital. No one's dying." So she gave a
Sounds
conference.
like my doctor,
right?
yeah.
She gave a conference, and the only people that showed up to the conference were the nurses and the divinity students. And the social workers. And so that was so interesting to me. She coined those stages of grief and loss not to be linear. You don't go through anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance in a linear way. You go through them in pieces, and they apply to any sort of loss. I still believe that there's truth in many of them as an experience of grieving. I'm not so sure that there is ever really acceptance, which is at the end, because I think there is a kind of surrender to the thing that you can't change, but it's not necessarily accepting what that, at least it was not for me in any of them. And so while I think that work, had a lot of work to do, there have been many changes to that work and great scholarship around grief and grief work and what it means to do that thing called grieving well. And I think she was just a wonderful champion way before her time. And the book has been extraordinary for many, many years.
You mentioned acceptance and surrender. Are they, what are the differences? How would you define each? Some people equate them, but there are definite differences as far as I'm concerned. What do you?
Yeah, I believe so. I think accepting is very different from surrendering. Acceptance, at least for me, carries with it you put it into your bank as a deposit. You've accepted the thing that's happened. You no longer no longer has any effect on you. And so I think that when you surrender to something, you know that you can't change that outcome, but it has had an effect on you, and you go through that surrendering almost, I don't know,
Over and over.
yearly. I was talking to Linda too about I remember Marilyn's death day more than I remember her birthday. And most people remember someone's birthday. And so I think that it feels different, when you can surrender under the thing that you have no control over. I was talking to a woman who was having a baby, and she said, I got to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. I was like, you had no choice, did you? You had to surrender to having that baby. She's like, I couldn't go back. And it was that same feeling of, oh no, what have I gotten myself into here? My child has died, and I can't make that go away, that reality. Yeah.
It's similar to that acceptance and surrender. There are people that either cannot or will not forgive or let go of the death of a loved one. And how would you, either using that silence or that nurse method, how would you approach them?
Someone who's unforgiving.
Yeah, that just can't, or that can't let go.
Or can't let go of it.
I mean, and I'm sure part of it is how much time has elapsed.
I think it is time, but I also think time isn't necessarily the thing that heals us. I think what you do with the time is equally important. It should be a verb, not a noun. And I think that's important. It's important to surround yourself with people who love you and accept you and don't challenge the way you're grieving or the way you're dealing with the loss. I do think that it's important that Emily Dickinson said that hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, that sings the song without the words and never stops at all. That is how do we imbue hope for people? There's a great scripture that talks about character, and it says that suffering produces character. And I used to think, I don't want any more character. I've got quite enough, thank you very much. But it goes on to say that loss or suffering or produces from within us a way it produces perseverance, right? So the thing, you got to go through it. Suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. Well, why do we need more character?
Yeah, exactly.
It goes
and
on
why
to
do
say,
I need more character than somebody else?
It goes on to say because character produces hope. And so that statement, that wise scripture that is, and it's hope for what? Hope is nothing on its own. Hope needs something. You have to hope in something. And so I would work with patients, and it would sometimes, it was hope for a cure. And then it became hope for enough appetite to eat a meal. And then it became hope for a call from my grandchildren. And then it became hope for a quiet, peaceful death. And so we always have something to hope in. And I think that's what builds that kind of understanding or empathy, when we always need something to hope in. And we always have to give hope to other people. People would say to me, don't tell Mother you're from hospice. We don't want her to know. And I would say, I'm from hospice, right? And she'd say, yes, I know you're from hospice. And so we do that more for the family. Ooh, and it's really kind of hilarious. And then the mother, I had a woman come to my office once, and she sat down and she said, she's sobbing, crying about her husband. And so I'd round in the hospice house, and I would go to see her husband. And one day he said to me, Maureen, I don't think my wife is upset that I'm dying. I said, what do you mean? She's in my office crying every day. And he said, well, I never see her cry. And so I thought, isn't that the most intimate relationship that you have in the world? And they were as far apart with their understanding of what was happening to them. So I brought her into the room, and I said, I need you to cry a little for your husband because he thinks you're not upset by this. And she began to weep, and they both began to weep, and we had a great hug fest. And I think sometimes we shield people right from that, and that's exactly what happened in that case. But we don't want to look weak, or we don't want to say the word D or death or hospice or that, right? Because surely
it would take away their hope.
But in fact,
It takes away your hope.
in my experience, it has the opportunity to have more hope.
Yeah.
Because you're aligned with what you're both hoping for, and you're going in the same direction.
Yes, absolutely. The other day, you gave a description of a box.
I did.
Grief in a box. And the way you shared that, really, I've been thinking about what you've said and how that relates to time.
Yeah.
Can you share that?
Yeah, so you imagine a small box. My grief is in this tiny box, and I'm affected. There's a ball inside the box with a button, and the ball is on the button constantly, and we're pushing the button, and we're grieving and grieving and grieving, and it's waves, right? And as your life and as your box gets bigger, the ball still bounces around in the box, and it still presses the button. But it presses it less and less as your life gets bigger and bigger. And maybe you can understand that. And you've had loss as well. And I think that's a great picture in my mind of it never goes away. You don't ever get over it. Time doesn't heal you. But the button, Marilyn's anniversary is in July, and Andre's is in July as well. The button is still there always, birthdays and anniversaries and those kinds of things. So I think that's a good picture, a good image in our head.
I saw a graphic that had that, and a video graphic, and it was like, wow, this is amazing.
It's a way that a lot of grief counselors educate and counsel about grieving, and I think it's important. I had been dealing with Marilyn's death. She died at the age of 28, but I was getting ready to. My boyfriend died in July. He was jogging around Central Park, and he had a heart attack and a dysrhythmia and died. We'd been living in Manhattan, and I was at Mount Sinai Hospital in the palliative care program there. And I was sort of just getting over, it was 3 years, I was getting over his death and trying to come to terms with that and trying to figure out what my life might look like in the next chapter, the next season of it. And on the same day that he died, my daughter died 3 years later. And so I was catapulted into grief again. And my box, while I felt like it was getting bigger and I was doing better, I was loving my work and loving what I was doing. And then I got back in that little tiny box again. And so when they say it takes about 3 years to sort of get through anniversaries and grieving where your box is a little bit bigger than it had been, I was right back in that tiny box again. And that's when I left New York City and moved back to Florida to take care of my mother with my sister, who was dying of dementia. And I thought, well, if anyone could be a good caregiver, it was me. I had a ton of empathy and a ton of compassion, but whew, that was tough. And I thought it would be a way to assuage some of my grief and work some of that out. And so I took
the frying pan and the fire.
I took some time off. But the good thing about that was that my sister and I, as adults, became great friends. And she lost a child as well. So we now live together in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Never imagined that I would live here ever, but we are friends, and we're sisters. We're connected through loss and understanding. She was Marilyn's fairy godmother. And I just think the seasons of my life sort of brought that on. Taking care of my mother was very difficult, and I realized when she died, I wasn't at all prepared. I hadn't really grieved well. I hadn't really done the work of what it really does mean to put things in perspective again and try to understand them. So it's tough. I wanted to read something if I could. There's a wonderful book that a lovely girl gave to me called The Art of Losing, Poems of Grief and Healing. It's edited by Kevin Young. And he says here, what grief tells us is that you don't always get a chance to say goodbye. And yet in many ways, the poetic elegy does just that. Sometimes it says so long, sometimes see you around. Sometimes the poem's filled with anger, asking why. Other poems say simply wait. Galway Kinnell's poem of that name, Wait, is an entreaty for someone to stay in this world, not to leave too early. Can also be read as a desire to console the living about the experience of loss. Can't tell you how many times I wanted to turn the light off and not be here any longer. The poem says this: wait for now. Distrust everything if you have to, but trust the hours. Haven't they carried you everywhere up to now? Personal events will become interesting again. Hair will become interesting. Pain will become interesting. Buds that open out of season will become interesting. Secondhand gloves will become lovely again. Their memories are what give them the need for other hands. Though dedicated to the dead, in a crucial way, elegies are written for the living, honoring the departed. And poems like that say to us, wait, don't do anything crazy, right? Wait. It was so helpful to me learning how to wait. Mm-hmm. That was a verb. To wait isn't a noun. It's waiting.
Yes.
Should be a verb.
Right.
Yeah.
Through all of this, there is that fragment of forgiveness. How important is the art of forgiveness?
I think it's a hard one. I think we all struggle with forgiving people who have betrayed us or hurt us, or we all struggle with I struggle with God's economy, in taking my daughter and my people. And so I think forgiveness is truly, when people would say it to me, I'd think, it was always hard for me
it's something you walk through.
You really do have to, and it really is for you. There's a when they were writing Hamilton, the play. In the play, Alexander and Eliza go through the loss of their child. Philip is killed in a duel that Alexander encouraged. If you've seen the play, you know there's a song called "It's Quiet Uptown." The musical director of Hamilton, as they were writing this song, he sent it to this couple who had just lost their child to suicide. And they said that it was the only thing that they could listen to for months and months and months. The song, I can read you a little excerpt from it. The song says, it's extraordinary. There are moments that the words don't reach. There is suffering too terrible to name. You hold your child as tight as you can and push away the unimaginable. The moments when you're in so deep, it feels easier to just swim down. It's quiet uptown. The song turns into forgiveness. Can you imagine forgiveness? Because through the death of their child, Eliza and Alexander come to forgive one another. And I think that it was true in my own life. The commonality of forgiving my ex-husband was so much. The only person in the world that could understand was him. And I also think the hardest part for me as a mother was watching my two sons lose their sister and not be able to help them in any way. They had to go through that too. And so Forgiveness is tough, but it is better for us. And forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation.
That's right.
Right? Forgiveness means that I can keep you at an arm's distance.
And it's surrendering to the fact that this is what it is.
Correct.
That's part of the surrender.
It doesn't eat your lunch anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't eat your lunch anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so in our conversations a few days ago, you shared that you were leading this conference, and you asked the participants the different phrases that they learned about death and dying.
It's kind of hilarious.
It is. It was hilarious.
So we teach people to use the word death, dead, and dying, and not to use those softened things. When
Passing away.
when I would say it, people would say, "Oh, that's what dying," you know. But it's so important that we use the correct language. As hard as it is forming in our own mouths, it's harder in the mouth of a loved one that is losing their loved one. So we did an exercise where name all the names for dead, death, and dying that you can think of. And we had the whole blackboard filled. Passing away, pushing up daisies, circle in the drain. There were hundreds of them on this wall. And we were all looking at each other like, what is wrong with all of us? Look at what we do to people. When we, as clinicians, can't say the word, and we're expecting our families and our patients to be able to say it too. It's so scary, and I'm sad that it's scary. You know, I have borne witness to so many people dying over my career, and I think I know the difference between a good death and a not so good one. And I do think that there is the ability to really have a peaceful place in your heart and your head as you die. You know, it's important work.
Yes.
You know, earlier you brought up the term walk in somebody else's shoes, but you need to take yours off first. You survived cancer.
Yeah.
And you've lost
Yeah.
many people in your life, very important people.
Yeah.
So looking back, you literally were walking in other people's shoes personally. What did you learn from that?
Well, I think not to take yourself so seriously. I think I remember sitting in the chemotherapy chair next to a little girl who was in her 30s, and the doctor walked by and mentioned to her that they would have a discussion when she came back to the office, but that her colon cancer had spread to her liver, and then he walked away.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm bald and 80 pounds with no eyelashes, and we're both getting chemotherapy, and I take her hand and she looks at me and she said, did he just say what I think he said? And I think that the empathy part of understanding, there is a sisterhood. There is a sisterhood, certainly in the breast cancer world, but men, men get breast cancer, 1 in 100 men. And so it's I learned so much. I think I learned to speak less. Here's what I learned. You got to show up. You got to pay attention. You have to speak from your heart and try not to be so attached to the outcome. I think honesty and integrity and character and understanding and empathy come from a way of being truly honest with people, communicating well with empathy, tending to emotion, helping people with those emotions and making sense of it, not giving them platitudes or answers to questions that they don't even know to ask. I remember sitting in my oncologist's office, and I looked like a waif, and he would keep saying to me, "Maureen, you're depressed." And I would say, "Bill, I'm not depressed. I'm sick. I was the shade of an elephant." And he would hand me samples of antidepressants. And while I have a little melancholy in my nature, I was sick, and he would turn his chair around and he'd dictate, Maureen comes to the office today with, and one time I yelled at him, I said, "Hey, I'm over here. Turn around and look at me." But I realized that it was hard for him. Doctors are people too, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that he cared a great deal about me. So that was really tough. So I learned a lot of lessons. I learned about being really honest with what you're feeling and what you're afraid of. I learned that the enemy wasn't really cancer. The enemy was despair that hides in cancer, and despair that hides in troubled children and financial problems and divorce and death. Despair was my enemy. Cancer would want to come and fight with me in the middle of the night, and it was 2 a.m. and I was in my pajamas and I could hardly throw a punch. But it would torment me with things like, "You're completely alone, you're going to die, you'll never see Marilyn get married," and all of those things that I was so afraid of. When I woke up that morning after I had that terrible dreaming of this fighting, I learned that I wasn't really fighting that at all. My real enemy was how to keep your hope alive, right? And how not to find despair in the midst of tragedy or sorrow or loss. And so I do think we have to identify the enemy, identify what it is really that is at the root of it, right? And work on those things, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
You're living a remarkable life. You're a survivor.
Yeah.
You've taught so many people and shared your knowledge with so many people.
Yeah.
Every aspect of your life, twists and turns and things. Life isn't a straight line, ever.
Boy, it sure isn't.
But what brought you to Sheboygan?
Didn't see that one coming.
No,
For sure.
not at all. From New York
It's
City
so
to Florida
funny.
and then
Yeah.
Sheboygan?
Yeah. So my sister lives here, and I moved into her little house that she was renting, and then we bought it. And we are, we call ourselves the Spinster Sisters of Sheboygan. She's not retired, although probably should be. But I think I joined a little hospice here, and that was, it was great for a while. And I think just a simpler life. I love to dig in the dirt. I was in South Florida, and it was hot, and it was crowded, and I wasn't feeling peaceful. And I feel peaceful here. I love wintering. I know people think I'm nuts, but I do love there is an art to wintering. I think it's that solstice, it's that inward, it's that quiet. I light a fire and have a glass of wine and read a book, or my sister and I watch Jeopardy now. But there's a quieter, softer way of living here that just resonates in my spirit. And so it's been lovely. It's been lovely.
And she has a beautiful, she has just a beautiful home, beautiful backyard. It just is, she just snuggled. For somebody who lives in town, she has a beautiful piece of property.
I do.
Well, and there's a lot to be said for 4 seasons. We sometimes have them all in 1 month.
Yes, like
in
this
spring.
year. Like this year.
In May.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I have been here, this summer will be my 4th year here. And I have been through 3 winters that we're all different,
When we first moved here, people, the thing we heard most often is, it's usually not like this.
Yeah.
Name the season, name the month. It's usually not like this.
Right.
So, and I think in 50 years, it's usually not like this is very, very true.
Right.
Yes.
So,
But boy, the spring is glorious.
Isn't it, though?
really is.
Just glorious.
It really is. My final question is, do you have any parting wisdom? Now, you shared a couple of poems with us, but do you have any other parting wisdom that you can share with us?
I probably do. I think that if we take anything away from this time together, I think we should take away the notion that dying is not optional, and preparing for it is important. And also, I think when you put on your armor to keep the arrows away, or protect yourself from the arrows that come at you, I think recognizing who you are, what you represent, and that we all have a contribution to make, whether we have, a 8-page resume or whether we have, no resume at all. I think there's a real lack of humanity in healthcare. I think that it is a right and not a privilege. And I think my hope is that the country will get back on track with the humanity that is missing lately. And I don't know if that's wisdom. I think buckle your seatbelt, though, because the ride of life is not an easy one. Surround yourself with people who love you, and the people who don't be so concerned about. Shut off the noise. I don't have any social media. I do a little bit on Instagram because I like to follow some people on there and keep in touch with my friends. I have a LinkedIn page that I sometimes use, but I think quiet down your mind, quiet down the social media and the competition with others, and just live a good, honest, integral, empathic life.
So the faster the world gets, slow down.
I think so.
Just slow down.
Sounds wise to me.
And I know we spend most of our time talking about death and dying.
I'm not much better at a cocktail party.
But there are other forms of way we grieve from the loss of a job, loss of your health, loss of a job. As we age, we know that we lose our standing in a family. Perhaps you're a matriarch or a patriarch and you get sick and you're diminished. We diminish our elders. I think there's so much loss in the world, and I think that's a topic for another session. It really is. Yeah. But I wanted to make sure that our followers know that we don't want to dismiss that there is grief in so many different aspects of our life.
Yes.
So I want to thank you, Maureen, for being here with us today.
Pleasure.
We are so blessed to have you in our lives.
Thank you.
And I'm so blessed to be able to call you my friend.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much.
So we really would like to have you share what your feelings are on death, using the word death, dying, dead, versus crossing over, passing, in the
Pushing up
transition.
daisies.
Pushing up daisies.
Circling the drain.
Yeah, circling the drain.
Gosh.
So we really ask you to share this video,
Put the
comments in, like us. We really need to have the likes and the comments.
And the hype, if you can ever find
where
button.
the hype is. Nobody's come forward to let us know where that hype is.
Yeah.
So we really want to build this podcast, and we can't do it without you. So please like, share, and comment.
Yes. And we are
Project Communication, and we are perfectly imperfect.
Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Spray sunshine.
Oh no, you got the lens.
Oh, did we?
You got to push. Stop.
Push it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.